So first, guys, I'm gonna give you a little short introduction about Pamela, and we'll start lesson 2, the talk. Okay, Pamela Napier. So she's the co-founder partner of Collabo Creative, a people-centered service design firm, as well as an assistant professor of visual communication design at Indiana University, Herron School of Art and Design in Indianapolis, Indiana. So where now she teaches across both undergraduate and graduate curriculum. And so her research areas include design facilitation, tools and methods for people-centered design research, and the interaction of values into design process. So she has presented and displayed her research both nationally and internationally. That's where I have met her in the conference in Chicago, Learn by Design. And she has facilitated workshops at design education conferences, events, and universities, and has worked with a variety of regional and national clients. Great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I already I give all the presentation to all the students so they can actually access that on their own computer too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Lee, you've already kind of talked to all of them about, this project and kind of our expectations for how it could possibly work, yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, well, so thank you so much for having me today. So after speaking with Lee a little bit, we kind of decided what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to talk about today is basically the structure, one of our curriculum, but also of the course that I'm teaching, and where we think there could be some really, interesting opportunities for collaboration for, both you all and my students as well. And so I'm going to take you through a little bit of how we've structured our course and how we're kind of going about doing the project work, and give you some examples. And then what I want to do is, kind of talk a little bit about the possibilities of how we could think about collaboration. So the course that I'm teaching here at Herron is called Design Methods for Innovation. And so there's a really strong focus on learning how to select, develop, and deploy design research methods with a people-centered approach. And so I co-teach this course with my business partner at Collabo, Terry Wada, which, Lee met her as well. So to kind of start a little bit, at Herron, we have, students don't start their essentially major track until their sophomore year. So they take a lot of foundational courses, like 2 and 3D design and creative processes. And so then once they get into the sophomore year, they're able to basically declare a major or a track that they want to explore. And so our sophomore curriculum really starts off with a kind of basic, more traditional graphic design stuff. So, they learn a lot about elements and principles, how to make meaning through construction of imagery. They learn all the basics about typography. They take a design history course. And then when they get into the junior year, they really start to explore more collaborative, creative problem solving in relationship to design. And so they take a couple of different studio courses. They take a production course, which teaches them techniques for, production design in both print and the digital world. And then, they also take an internship. And then their senior year, which is what this course is, this Visual Communication 5, Designing for Innovation, is one of their main curricular experiences. So they take this studio course while they're also deciding on a specific track to take for their capstone class, and then everybody takes a portfolio development course in the spring semester. So those two tracks, they're both centered around people-centered experiences, and so they focus on either service design or digital interaction design. So while they're taking this capstone experience, they're also taking VC5, which is this Design Methods for Innovation course, which they take in the fall semester only. Senior level fall semester course, it's about 3 credits. So we meet about the same as you guys do. We meet for about 2.5 hours, 2 times a week. And our semester duration is about 16 weeks. We only get to see each other 2 times a week, which I'm sure you probably noticed too isn't quite enough sometimes.
Yeah.
So the course structure that we're using, and that I'm sure it's similar to what you're doing, or it might mirror what you're doing, but it's essentially broken into about 8 different phases or 8 different categories that we focus on. And so and I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail, but we start with a lot of introductory stuff. And feel free, Lee, or any of you, just to interrupt me and say, hey, stop, I have a question, okay?
Yep.
So we start off with some mission statement development and some, practice visualizing data. We go through an introduction about design thinking and and we have a reflection. And then we introduce people-centered design research, and then we start our project work. So essentially, for the first 3 weeks of the semester, we are doing a lot of introductory, a lot of exercise-based type stuff until we, start the project work in the fourth week, which is where we get into contexts. And then the 5, 6, and 7 are the 3 phases of the design process that we're using. And so they, carry that out for several weeks, in each of those phases. And then we spend, the end of the semester working on reflection and, final documentation. So let me get into this a little bit. So in developing a mission statement, I think you guys have done something similar, or maybe you've had some similar conversations where we really want students to reflect on, what is their mission while they're here. And so we've posed some prompting questions that we've gotten from a source, and we really want them to start thinking about what their goals are and how they, see themselves leaving some kind of an impact, what they value, and what they really want to accomplish this semester in the course. And so they develop this statement in the beginning, and then at the end of the semester they do a reflection statement where they are basically looking at, did I reach the goals I set for myself, and have any of my values changed after my experience in this course? So then we go through some data visualization exercises, and these are just a couple of examples, but we essentially want our students to kind of brush up on their information design skills, and so we give them a couple of different activities where they're able to find both a qualitative and a quantitative set of data, which, Lee, have you guys talked about the difference between the two?
No, we are actually, because of the time frame, we did not implement the data visualization part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, because you guys you're much more truncated than we are. We've got 16 weeks to do this, and you guys are much shorter. But so we have them look for quantitative and quantitative being mostly about, facts and numbers and statistics, and qualitative data is then more about experiences and journeys and feelings and emotions. And so, you can approach the two, both similarly and very differently in how you visualize that data, but they both, serve a different purpose. So we go through some of those exercises, and then we begin our introduction to design thinking. So we run a crash course that they use at the Stanford D School, and it's a really rapid activity. It takes about an hour, and it essentially takes students through a design process where, they start with a particular challenge. In this case, it was redesigning a gift-giving experience for their partner, and they go through, the 3 phases of the design process. So they start by, asking questions, interviewing each other. They move into, framing a challenge, and then coming up with ideas, and, so sketching and prototyping their solutions, and then getting feedback from their partner, and then eventually making, a final prototype. So it's a really quick way just to kind of be introduced to, how design thinking can be integrated into the design process, and a really surface level exploration into research methods.
Yeah, we went through that.
Oh, you did do the
yeah.
crash course?
Mm-hmm.
Great. What did you guys think about that?
It was fun. No.
It was fun? Yeah. Yeah, it was quick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these images that you're seeing here, after the students did the activity, we had them do a couple of readings. We used Tim Brown's design thinking article that was in HBR, and another one. But we had them essentially synthesize what they learned from the readings and what they learned from the activity, the crash course. And here you can see we had them get in teams and visualize what they understood. So it was a really kind of quick reflective activity that got them to think about, okay, how do we put all of this together when we think about methods and process? And so that was some examples that you see here. And so this is where we are right now. We actually just gave a lecture yesterday on this introduction to people-centered design research and what that is. And so what I'm going to do is take you really quickly through some of the lecture slides that we gave in our class. And then everything from here on out, we still have yet to do in this course, but I'm using, you know, previous class examples to kind of show you where we're headed. So how do we define people-centered design research? So we think about it as including and requiring three different things. So it requires a mindset, a specific mindset. It requires a specific set of skills, and it requires understanding how to select and deploy methods. So a mindset, what is that? So it's an established set of attitudes or values. And so at Collabo, and both at Herron, we kind of frame our mindset or our values around three core themes or three core ideas. And one is the belief that people are experts of their own experiences. And so they are the ones that have the most knowledge into what their needs and wants and desires and pain points are. So that's the first key one. The second one is that, you know, we believe that all people have the ability to design. We don't believe that all people are designers, right? Like not all people have gone through school and are being trained in design, but all people have the ability to design. They just need a little help. And they need, you know, somebody who is trained in, you know, design facilitation and research to kind of help them along the way. And then we also believe in designing with people, not for people. And so, you know, I think you probably are all aware of, you know, this really important transition that designers have made over the past, you know, I don't know, decade or more, in that, you know, we're transitioning from not just being these, you know, folks that come in at the end of the line and make something and package it really nice and kind of, you know, we're given a problem, we go away into our, you know, dark little corner and we make the magic happen and then we come back and say, ta-da, right? You know, we're not that role anymore. Where our role is increasingly becoming, you know, the facilitator of engagements with, you know, really diverse groups of people for really big, wicked problems. And, you know, it's not just about designing for them, but it's about including people throughout the entire process. And so ultimately, you know, we believe in that potential, right? The potential that all people have the ability to, and you can kind of notice this here, that this mimics or reflects the design process, and that all people have the potential to identify challenges, to create innovative solutions, and to bring about meaningful change. And so what we like to do at Collabo and what we want to teach our students to do is to unleash that potential. So then the second part is about skills. So, you know, skills are what? Those are technical abilities, right? To be able to do something very well. And so one key skill that is becoming a really big, it's a really big emerging trend right now in the design discipline, and it's called design facilitation. And it's about, you know, facilitating really diverse groups of people through creative problem-solving processes in order to create really meaningful, innovative solutions and meaningful social change. And so this is just kind of a quick overview, and, you know, we could probably talk about this more in the future, but we break down design facilitation into two different areas. So there's an approach, and there's shaping the designer. So this mindset, skills, and characteristics the design facilitator must possess. And then you have the approach, and the approach is made up of having a design process and process skills to be able to utilize that process, to understand how to select and utilize design research methods, and then utilizing a planning framework when you're going to be engaging with people throughout the process. Preparation and planning is key. And so, you know, we have very specific frameworks that we use to help aid in that planning. And so here's just a couple of images. You can see Terry and I there on the left facilitating a session with a bunch of different folks from a hospital. And so, you know, you can see us right then at the front of the room. You know, we're kind of engaging in a discussion. And then in the right-hand picture, we're engaging people in an activity. And that's one of the things that, you know, design facilitation is great for. It's about empowering and enabling people to share their experiences, their ideas, to make decisions, to prototype things. And so how are you able to do that? Another skill set that we need to possess within people-centered design is making, right? And so you guys are all makers, right? You're designers. You're learning how to, become excellent makers. I'm sure most of you already are. And so, we clarify making by, two different areas, right? So we're talking about making for communication and making for clarity. So here you can see kind of an example of making for communication. So here Terry and I are actually capturing a dialogue that's happening at a conference in real time. And then on the right-hand side, this is a synthesized visual that we used to then give them as a kind of follow-up after the conference. People received this. And so it not only helps people engage and connect to what's being talked about in real time, but then it also serves as this takeaway that can help maybe reinforce any kinds of ideas or concepts. And this is kind of a big thing right now too, this idea of like visual note-taking. If any of you have heard that term, a lot of people are doing this as a profession. They're being invited into organizational meetings, to conferences, to capture dialogue because it engages people in a different way. And then you have, making for clarifying complexity, right? And so it's not about simplification of information, but it's about taking the really complex nature of the information that you deal with in people-centered design research and being able to visually communicate it in really engageable ways. So you can see the image on the right, we're hosting a session where we're really trying to frame out some communication strategies. And then on the left-hand side, you can see how that manifests into a communication map. For the client. So, it's not about kind of dumbing down that complexity, but it's about, making it engageable and making it very clear. And then the last part, people-centered design research has methods, okay? And so methods are all about having some kind of logic or procedure for being able to collect data that you need throughout the design process. And so this is a framework that we developed at Collabo to help us think about how we can select the most appropriate design methods for the task at hand. And so we like to refer to these 4 quadrants as modes of inquiry. And on the left-hand side, you have modes of inquiry that help enable divergent thinking. And divergent thinking is all about utilizing abductive reasoning. It's about being very open. If you think about traditional brainstorming sessions, it's about, going for quantity, right? Not placing judgment. And then, on the flip side, you have convergent thinking, and that's where you need to apply logic and you need to make decisions based on criteria. And so it's very important to keep those two things separate throughout the design process because, you're constantly doing some things that are divergent, and then you need to, come back and converge and make a decision so that you can move to action, right? Because that's what we want to do. We want to move to action. We want to make things happen. We want to make change happen, positive change at that. So these 4 categories, we've broken them into exploratory modes of inquiry or exploratory methods, right? So you're exploring what exists. And then, a little bit further down the line, there's envisioning. So you're conducting methods that help participants and stakeholders envision what could be. And then starting to get into the convergent side, you have then sense-making methods, which help to shape understanding. So, you collect all this really messy data. Maybe you have, transcriptions from interviews, and you have observations that you've made from, immersing yourself in a context. So you have all these Post-it notes and all these, scribbles and sketches. So then how do you make sense of that? So there are methods for sense-making. And then all the way on the end of convergent is evaluative. So there are specific design research methods that you can use to help people to make decisions so that they can select the best option to move forward with and to move to action. So I have some examples, listed underneath of each of these, but I have some images that I'll show you as well. So you have modes of inquiry, right? But you also have modes of engagement. And so both of these frameworks help in being able to select the most appropriate method. So you not only want to think about, okay, what kind of inquiry are you doing or what kind of thinking do you want to enable, but you also want to figure out how you're going to engage people. And so on this matrix, you'll see there are, 2 sides. So there's a user as participant or a user as subject. So a user as participant is when you are actively engaging with them, you are facilitating them through activities. And then you have user as subject where you're not interacting with them. Maybe a user as subject example could be you're just simply observing, right? You're a fly on the wall, You're being as unobtrusive as possible. And then on the other axis, you have where the researcher is present, right? So you're there, you're either engaging or you're observing, but you're present. You're in the context, you're in whatever space your participants are in. And then on the other side, you have where you're not present. So, there are some methods that fall under the category called cultural probes. And it's essentially where you create some kind of a tool, right? You use your making skills, you create some kind of a tool, and then you go and put it out in the world. You hang up a poster with a prompting question and leave a few markers and see what happens. And then you go away for a few days, and then you come back and you see how people respond to the prompt that you put out there. So that can be an example of where, the researcher might not be present in engaging people. So if just one example, I think of each. So exploratory. So an exploratory method could be ethnographic observation, right? So you're in the person's context. You're in their space where you can observe their daily habits and behaviors. And if you can't tell, this photo was totally staged because how can you take a picture of yourself while you're observing someone, right? It's impossible. So this photo is totally staged with my colleague. That's actually Herron Lee.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So then an example of sense making, so you can see in the background the grayscale image, that's trying to make sense of a lot of data that was collected. And this is a method called affinity diagramming, where you're sorting and categorizing data based on relationship, based on distance, whatever the criteria may be. And then the digital visual that you see is just a partial experience map that was developed after the affinity diagramming was done. And then this is a kind of a combination of both an envisioning method and an evaluative method. So you can see that the grayscale image on the left, and then in the upper right-hand corner, the kinds of really basic tools that the students used to create essentially a park with, bike paths, and you can see down in the right-hand corner the actual concept model, right? So on the left, they were doing some rapid prototyping of what this park could look like, and then on the right, it's a higher fidelity version of the concept. So how can they, better communicate this concept that they had for this park? And so this is the process that we essentially use with Collabo. Our students use like a 3-phase version of this, but you can start to see how, where the red colored people are, how we can involve people throughout the entire process, right? So, you engage with them in the beginning, you engage with them to understand, to help frame the most appropriate challenge to tackle, to come up with ideas, and then to prototype and test and evaluate those ideas. And so it's up to you to decide, when is it appropriate to include them and how are you going to do that? And so again, back to that changing roles conversation, we're being asked to play multiple roles now. We're not just makers anymore, but we're really, being asked to be at the decision table, to facilitate people, and to manage and enable collaboration with, people from very diverse backgrounds and perspectives. So that was the whole kind of lecture, that we gave as an intro to people-centered design research yesterday. Where we're moving as a class on Wednesday is we're going to start forming our teams, which, Lee was so great to share with me. You guys are already in your teams. You already have, your challenges framed. And I mean, it's fantastic. So you're a little bit ahead of us here, but so we're getting ready to form our teams, and we're basing it loosely on Minbassador's creative problem-solving profile. So the students essentially do this kind of test where it categorizes them and says, hey, this is your preference for solving problems. You're either a generator, a conceptualizer, an optimizer, or an implementer. And so on the right, you can see one student, how she's mainly in the generating and implementing quadrants. And so the idea, and Lee, I'll send you some PDF handouts of these two in case you guys want to look at them. But, the idea is that you have as diverse makeup as possible, right? So some people that might prefer to, be a generator and really get things started, and they love the initial research part. And then there might be other people who, they just want to get stuff done. Like, they don't want to sit and conceptualize for days and hours. Like, they just want to move. They want to make a decision and get it done, right? But the interesting thing with this test, though, too, is that, everybody is a mix of all four quadrants. Like you can see Lisa's example, she's in all four quadrants, but she has a preference for one. And so, our hope is to divide our teams with the most, diverse makeup of these areas as possible. We're also going to give them criteria for how they select what kind of context they want to work in. And I think this is where you guys come in. And so you can see here where I've started to kind of break this down. So I have examples of all of your challenge statements and, the kind of problem spaces that you're going to work within. What Terry and I are going to do is give our students this list, but frame it in a little bit of a different way. So what we might say, instead of how might we help Conway grow its art and culture, might we help Indianapolis maybe, or how might we help IUPUI, right? So we want to give them a similar context, but obviously in a different geographic location. But we also need to frame it in a way that we're just labeling growing Indianapolis's art and culture scene as a context that they could select. And so if I go back here, you can see there are lots of criteria for how the students are going to determine what context they want to work within, like accessibility, locality, cost, transportation. So that's how we're going to frame these contexts for our students. And then the hope, which is, what Lee and I are hoping, is that we're going to be able to find some overlap. And, maybe a group of our students will have the same interest in educating the public about mental health problems in Indianapolis. And what each of our groups, so Team 4, you'll be able to get with a group of my students who are essentially focusing in the same problem space. And you'll be able to share the research that you found, the methods that you're using, and we can compare and contrast, well, what's similar in Arkansas, what's similar in Arkansas and Indiana, or what's different, and I think it's a really great opportunity to think about not only collaborating across, processes and content, but also thinking about how, two different groups of people in two different, areas of the United States are focusing on similar problems, because, maybe something could be created where it could be applied to another state or another city, right? So I think it could have a lot of life to it. And I really hope that, you guys as student teams, and as, good design researchers and thinkers, that you will hopefully want that opportunity to be able to share and collaborate and build on what each other are doing. So we're headed in that direction. We're going to move through our design process. And so, you can see within problem formulation, we're starting contextual research. We're going to analyze data. And then you see on the right-hand side, they're going to define their challenge statement. So here's some examples of our students doing some work in the problem formulation phase. So the students on the left are doing some research on our school's shuttle transportation system. So they rode around with shuttle drivers and interviewed and observed them. They interviewed, shuttle riders, non-shuttle riders. And then on the right-hand side, you can see they're starting to analyze their data, right? They're making sense of all the different observations that they had and all the different questions that they asked. Moving into solution formulation, it's all about generating ideas and coming up with some kind of a prototype, right? So here's some examples of some methods that my students have done. The one on the left was, it's called brain walking. And so they essentially had about 5 or 6 questions that they posed to the group. And so each participant would be at a station. They would write their answers to the question. They would be timed, and then they would each shift, right? So they would get to answer all 6 questions, and then they would have a discussion around it. And then on the image on the right, that's where they're starting to do some affinity diagramming. So they're collecting all of the responses that they got from people and trying to categorize them and make groups so they can read the patterns in the responses that they gathered. Here's some other solution methods. So the one on the left, it's called modular modeling. So these students were trying to figure out how to create an organization for independent musicians in Indianapolis. So after having all of these, initial interviews and observations and context immersion in the first phase. Here, they're taking everything that they've collected and they're saying, okay, this is what we've heard from everybody. What would you like within your organization? And so they're essentially doing some card sorting here to say, well, this is what I would like in my organization. And then the one on the right, they create this called solution storyboarding. So this is a method where you create a narrative by storyboarding, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. You create a storyboard and you have several different options, and then you let participants pick and choose which options out of that narrative they would like to include to eventually create a whole new storyboard with their preferred solution or state. And then finally, in solution implementation, this is about, taking the prototypes that you've made, testing them, getting feedback, analyzing that feedback, and then developing a refined solution. So here, with the music organization, they essentially created a systems map and a journey map that described, this is what would happen in the organization. This is how you get in. This is how it operates. These are all the different services that it could offer. And they did an evaluative interview with somebody who was not only, a big influence in the indie music scene, but also it was known for, creating startup organizations. So, they chose an expert, right? Somebody that has that subject matter expertise that could give them really valuable feedback on their prototype. And so these are some of the final solutions. So, when we end our process, we end up with a prototype, right? So it's maybe not something that is implemented, but it's as close to a final prototype as can be. And so our solutions really range. So these are 3 different student projects from last year. So the top right one, you can see, this was the shuttle transportation group. So they created a whole new system of signage to help shuttle riders better identify shuttle routes. And you can see they created actual signs and hung them up outside, and then they would engage with shuttle riders to get their evaluative feedback. And you can see, the final prototype on the right, it has that kind of fuzzy glow around it because one of the things that came up over and over was lit signage, helping people find their shuttle routes in the dark. I mean, it seems like a kind of a simple thing, but that's what, that's what the people wanted. So the bottom one then, this student group worked with a organization called The Platform, where it's basically a makerspace, right? So you can go and have, shared collaborative workspace. And they needed not only a better, interior setup with just, their furniture and their flow, which you can see they created a blueprint on the left. But on the right, they also conceptualized these really big interactive boards that would let people know what was going on with each of the organizations. It had maps, it had videos. And then the ones on the left, the Indie Music Unite, that was the nonprofit organization. So they not only had a user journey map, but they had an organization breakdown. They developed the mission and vision. And actually, that one is in the process of potentially being developed right now. So that's kind of exciting. And then at the very end of the semester, we really focus heavily on reflection, not only throughout, but at the very end. So, there are 2 different kinds of reflection that we focus on, and one is about reflecting in action. So they are going to give 3 presentations, which hopefully we'll be able to share somehow. If not, remotely, then we can tape it and send it to you guys. But they give a presentation at the end of each phase that outlines the methods that they did, the process they used. And at the very end of the semester, they deliver a case study, which essentially documents their entire process and the methods that they used. And that can be in any format. So some students do books, some do digital PDFs, some do websites. But that's essentially, along with their final prototype, that's their final deliverable. So, again, this is just kind of a closing statement, but, the ability for, somebody to operate in the design discipline today, needs the mindset, the skills, the knowledge about methods, so that they can carry out people-centered design research in order to, create meaningful social change. And I think that's what we're really hoping for with you all and with my students is how can we do that collaboratively and long distance, I think, is a key thing there.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, do you guys have any questions coming up?
Yes, please. Any questions? It's a lot. It's a lot at once, I know.
think it helped like understand what we're actually trying to do now. Like, because before we were just kind of going in blind doing things, and we didn't really understand why we were doing them. And I think this whole presentation has helped us like finally get like, oh, this is where we're going with it.
Good. It helps to see like a tangible example, right, of it being
Yes.
paired from start to finish.
Lots of different methods you use to organize thoughts and ideas. I mean, reading a little book is one thing, and seeing it being done is
Applied is another
more
thing.
helpful,
Yeah.
Great.
So do you so does your student have any like group focus on out of context, say like because we have a group who are interested in solving the in-risk kids in Africa, for
I
example.
saw that. That's
right.
exciting.
Yeah. So have your student have had anything done with like out of the context that they can actually reach and immerse themselves in that like users experience?
Nothing that far. We've mainly focused on local because we want them to get that like hands-on field research. But I think like the ability to reach that far and to kind of rethink how you can engage people, long distance, I think is awesome to explore. We haven't taken the opportunity to do that yet. So we've only kind of concentrated on local or regional, like places where, or experiences where students could have, direct contact with people, right? And that they could go there and observe. So I'll be really interested to see how that group, how you kind of organize your methods and how you plan to engage people. Because I think most of it will have to be remote, right? Unless you guys get to go to Africa, which would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, so okay, another thing I think I would also like to know too, because for our class we define the problem and then student would going out and seek the partner, or the organization to collaborate with, and the solution itself may be applied to the organization, or if the organization say, okay, we don't need anything like that, but we would still focus on solving the problem instead of say catering for what the organization want the student to do. Yeah. So in your situation or in some of the examples that you showed, is there any group of the student who has dealt with organizations and found there are similar expectations coming up from the organization or something like that?
Yes, absolutely. So we had one student group that they focused on a local coffee shop, right? And so they wanted to help the coffee shop have better community outreach, basically. And so they did all this research. They went through the whole process with the coffee shop owners and people that went to the shop, and they found very specific problems from the fact that the trash bins were really hard to find, all the way to hey, they're not doing enough community stuff, but they're saying they are. And so what ended up happening was what the coffee shop owners, that their main problem owners, what they really wanted wasn't necessarily what the students had found. I think they were kind of like, well, we kind of want to update our website. They automatically went to those kind of traditional visual communication design outcomes, which the students could certainly do. But what they also ended up delivering, the students, they delivered essentially a book that was a book of recommendations on, here's the research that we did, here's what we found, here's what your customers are saying. This is what we would recommend. And so the recommendations included everything from, reorganizing the interior layout of the shop to, creating community events that they host in the shop in order to create, more community relationships and cohesion. So, I have had students that have had a little pushback before. I mean, another student group worked with a bar. And the bar needed better wayfinding, essentially. And so they allowed the students to create some new wayfinding signage, go into the bar, hang it up, observe people, talk to them. And, I think they ended up implementing their new signage. So, we've had it on both ends where, we've had partners that have been like, yes, this is the one thing that we really need that you found. And then we've had others that are like, well, that's great that you found all this stuff. And yeah, it's important, but we can't really do it right now. But we really appreciate the research, and so the students are like, well, great, here's what we found, and if we can help you in the future, that'd be great.
Great. Any other questions?
Not questions, but I just really like how clear information is. It's a very good guide.
Great.
Could you say that again? I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to say that the presentation is very well done. The slides are very clear. And I
Thank
really like the design and the
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so it's a comment, not a question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So, Pamela, we are really looking forward to collaborate with your student. And if any of your group, are interested in the topic that one of this team have chosen, yeah, we would love to share resource, share insights, share all the things that they start doing from the beginning. Yeah. And,
Absolutely. Well, I think, one, we're really going to push it. And
yes.
two, we're going to also push, the opportunity, I think, that it presents for all of you guys, for you guys on your side and for my students as well. And that, it's a really powerful thing to have, in your portfolio, right? To show your ability to collaborate not only with, diverse communities, but also with, other students in another program in a completely different state. I mean, that's really powerful, especially in the climate of design today and the kinds of positions that are being created. I think it'll be a really powerful thing. So we're going to try and, push that as well. But I also think, you guys as those 4 teams, I'm kind of re-looking at the list of contexts that you had, and those are really interesting. You're looking at basic needs, you're looking at growing arts and culture, you're looking at, elementary school kids activity. Those are really interesting context areas, and so I think that that'll be appealing to the students as well. So I will be in touch. We're going to figure this out, next week. They're going to select their contexts, and we're going to, kind of talk through this whole collaboration. And so here within about the next week and a half or so, we will hopefully be pairing you guys up.
Yes, great. Yeah, and because we have 3 big presentations too, and hopefully you can Skype in and also be one of our critique guests. Yeah, to go through the project with us. Yeah. And I will catch up with your student presentation and everything too. Okay.
Beautiful. That sounds great. Yeah. And hey guys, if you have any other questions or you need something clarified, please feel free to give them my, email, contact information, and don't hesitate to contact me at all. If you have any questions or you need to see any other examples, I'd be happy to share. So just let me know.
Okay. Yeah. You guys hear that, right? All right. Okay, great.
Down.
Thank you so much, and I'll let you go as well as the students. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for having me, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.